Okay, well, we might as well get things going, just where it's a couple minutes after 7, and then people are late, they can just come on in. So my name is Meredith Batt, and I'm the Vice President of the Queer Heritage Initiative, New Brunswick. And it's a great honor for me tonight to be here with interviewer Dusty Green and Natalie Sappier and Vaughan. So I'm just going to introduce them to you briefly, and then I'll hand things over to Dusty. Just a few housekeeping things. So washrooms are just around the corner off to the right down the hallway, and there is also a water fountain. So just again down that same hallway. And I just want to say there'll be a very small reception at the end, some snacks. This is a free event, but if you would like to make a donation to QHINB, the donations go towards our programming, winter programming and stuff that we're going to be doing later on this winter and into the spring. So no pressure, but if you feel like making a donation. Okay, perfect. So Vaughan is a Canadian writer and video artist living in Montreal. However, he's here this winter as writer in residence at the with UNB. And Vaughan's books include poetry collections, a selection of dazzling scarves, Invisible to Predators, Ruined Stars, Troubled. His novels A Quilted Heart and Spells were met with critical acclaim, and he's the author of many theater works, including the recently published 1 Year After, as well as plays Camera Woman and the Monster Trilogy. Selected essays entitled Compared to Hitler was released in 2013, and his nonfiction book Bright-Eyed Insomnia and Its Culture was a bestseller in Canada and in translation in South Korea. Vaughan's essays, poems, fiction, and drama are collected in over 60 anthologies and art catalogs, and he is also a contributor and contributes to cultural commentary and art reviews for a number of national and international newspapers and magazines. His video collaborations play in festivals and galleries around the world and are included in collections of the School of Art Institute of Chicago and the Whitney Museum of American Art. His latest video collaboration, House Dress, recently toured Mexico as part of the retrospective of queer video works. And like I said, he's born in St. John, but from St. Martin's and Quispamsis. So it's really wonderful that we're able to have RM here with us tonight, being a New Brunswicker, but then also and that he's here with us this winter and collaborating with us on future projects. So it's pretty great. Natalie Sappier is a Wolastoqiyik Indigenous multidisciplinary artist and storyteller from Tobic First Nation, New Brunswick, and she began her art practice as a painter and designer and as an alumnus of the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design. Her painting style and visual storytelling is rooted from the Wolastoqiyik motifs inspired by the Wabanaki lands and teachings. It carries a symbolic movement, which she calls Dancing the Four Directions, which represents our emotions, our dance of spirit and song. Painting awakened her. It deepened her curiosity for who she was as Wolastoqiyik. Her storytelling became a healing journey. So her first play, Finding Wolastoq Voice, was created in residency with guidance and mentorship of artistic director Tom Morgan-Jones at Theatre New Brunswick, and was part of their 2017-18 season. And it was shown on New Brunswick stages and international stages, and it was the first Wolastoqiyik play that was shown, and also toured at the National Arts Centre. She was the first UNB Arts Centre artist in residence since Bruno Go back in the 1960s, and worked on Mall, which was a collaboration with Wolastoqiyik storytellers, dancers, and musicians and artists, and we look forward to hearing more about that tonight. So thank you so much for giving up your time this evening and attending as well. And Dusty Green, the president of the Queer Heritage Initiative of New Brunswick, he graduated from St. Thomas University in 2013 with a double major in English Lit and Visual Art, and earned a diploma in graphic design from the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design in 2016. Originally from Plaster Rock, New Brunswick, Dusty moved to Fredericton in 2008. While attending STU, he founded Student Association at St. Thomas and was a regular contributor and editor of Stuart magazine and created dozens of exhibitions while studying at MBCCD. Dusty came across a small amount of queer material held at the Provincial Archives of New Brunswick when he was an intern here, and set out on a long journey of establishing a community archive to collect and preserve the stories of queer New Brunswickers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dusty. Hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and stay for the reception afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks so much for coming, and thank you for that lovely series of introductions, Meredith. She thought that she wouldn't have to do a lot of work, and then we all sent her really lengthy bios about ourselves. So, thank you, and thank you everyone for coming. It means a lot to see new and familiar faces in front of us. And lastly, thank you to the Provincial Archives of New Brunswick for hosting us tonight, and a double thank you to them for housing the Queer Heritage Initiative's Vaughan, where we have a permanent collection here, thanks to them, which is very kind of them. This microphone situation feels weird. Can you hear me without it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
I hate them too.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, like, it's a relatively intimate setting, despite the barrier between us. We're just people, so I'm really happy to have both of you here, so that we can all talk about creativity and the process of making and how that relates to our individual identities, and hopefully we can learn something from each other, and hopefully people that showed up here today walk away with something that they can use in their own life and make the world a better place.
That's a lot of stuff I have to do in one night.
Yeah, I know. That's a tall order, but you better make people's lives better in the next hour.
Next book.
Given the name of the event, which is Creativity and Identity, Art and Finding Joy in Life-Based Work. Thank you. That's the name of the event. I was coming up with ideas for things that we could talk about, or discussion prompts for tonight. And in meeting before, I was sure that all of us would be able to talk at length. I know that that's not an issue for any of us. But I kept coming back to negative prompts, or questions centered around negativity and stigma, because we talk a lot about those things when we talk about identity, I think. So I really tried to focus or recenter the questions tonight to focus them more on joy and connecting joy with identity. I suspect at some point we will talk about stigma and negativity, no doubt, because that's sort of part of sussing out your own identity, I think. But I guess I'm just trying to keep that in mind as we move forward. So I'm not going to dictate who answers what, but given the name of the event, I think it's important that we talk about the idea of identity, or the concept of identity as you understand it, and sort of how your identity relates to your creative output.
Okay.
Go ahead. Natalie was Samaqani Cocaqh. Right there, that's my identity, is my language. And it's really important for me to, honor my language, and to honor that, acknowledge that we are on Wolastoqiyik territory, and the unceded, unsurrendered territory. And I think that's really important for us to recognize. It's land acknowledgement. It's funny, but when I say that, Usually all I really should say is I'd like to honor and recognize the beautiful Wolastoqiyik territory we're all here that we call home. And I see it as a responsibility for us not to forget that language and not to forget the ones before and not to forget all the teachings and all the magic that's within the land. And for me, that's I'm constantly learning from the land. I'm constantly learning from my language, more of who I am as a Wolastoqiyik person. But I'm also mixed blood, and not too many people know that about me. I was raised in a First Nation community in Tobic. My single mother, but that's all I know. So sometimes I have to remind myself of my mixed blood, remind myself of, why that I see the world colorblind in a way. And I think that's really important for me to talk about that. So I will leave it at that for now, before I go on forever.
Well, that's something you and I have in common in an indirect way.
Yeah.
Although my mixed heritage was not racialized, I'm an adopted child. I have zero idea who my biological people are, and that was kind of the beginning of. And it sounds negative. I don't mean it this way. I've lived my entire life in a perpetual state of something like displacement, but I don't feel that that's bad. I did when I was younger, but I don't now. And I now see it as a kind of gift. But when you come from you have no idea, you're growing up as a kid, you're hanging out with other kids and they all have families and they look like their parents, or they say things like, oh, well, he's going to be tall because his dad is, and stuff like that. I never had any of that. And I used to think I was missing something, and now I see it as a kind of freedom that allows me to move between spaces without too much of a burden of identity. And clearly, had this been a racialized question, then it would be a whole other game. But at this point in my life, and weirdly coming back to New Brunswick for an extended period of time, I've always come back. My family still all lives here. It's never been longer than like a week, 2 weeks at the most. And now that I have these months before me and have begun them, I'm starting to notice little things of like, oh yeah, I know that, I remember that, I know where that comes from, I know where that voice comes from. And it is that connection that you describe, it is a kind of magic that I felt that I was away from for a very long time. And it's been a great thing to reconnect to it.
And growing up in Tobic, in a community of an amazing family, of a beautiful childhood, I came here. It was really hard for me to leave my community and go to school. I wanted to go home right away after that, because why leave a community of love and best friends and all these things, But I kept on gravitating towards coming back here. And I really struggled with home. What is home, right? I felt a little bit, and it all ties into identity too, because my relationship to the land is like, okay, I'm in Fredericton. I feel like I should be doing what I'm doing at home because I feel a sense of responsibility as, as an Indigenous storyteller, as someone who's doing the work that I do, that I feel like I should be home. And so I really struggled with that. And then as I started learning more about the teachings and realizing that, we were placed in these areas, you know what I mean? Home was all along this river for me. And what I also discovered is I decided I'm gonna go be that artist. I'm gonna pack all my bags and I'm gonna travel down to California or something. I went to Montreal, I never left. I went to Montreal and I was like, okay, I was there for 3 months and I was having a hard time to find a place that was just still. I missed the river. And the river was what brought me back home. And I realized that I can travel but it doesn't mean I have to like uproot myself somewhere else,
Mm.
you know? And and I realized that the more that I was going around home here in New Brunswick and along the river, there are so many stories and so many relationships that, you know, is in my, you know, bloodline that I don't know yet.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden become excited. I'm still excited about being home
Mm.
and breathing those stories and feeling those stories. And I said, you know what? As long as I'm along the river, I'm home.
Mm.
So I don't struggle with that, you know. I really tore down the walls that were built up around us as Indigenous people. That, you know, we feel like, you know, we have to find a place.
Mm.
You know, no, the place is underneath us, and you know, my place is here, and my place is out there. It's everywhere, right? And I don't know why I started talking about that, but you know, it wraps around all the work that I do, though. Yeah.
So when I saw the last performance of Ma at the UNB Arts Center, something that I thought was really amazing afterwards was that first, immediately it was clear that between the three people actually involved in the performance, there's a level of intergeneration and sort of collaboration in that way.
Yeah.
But afterwards, when you were speaking to the crowd, there were elders, presumably from inside and outside of your community there, relating deeply with what was being talked about. And I was wondering if you could just talk about your relationship with elders and storytelling, and how that sort of fits into your creative process or your output, or how elders and storytelling fit into the creation of Ma, maybe?
It's amazing how, you know, as a child, you know, we go and we see, we walk with this purity, this innocence in our eyes and everything's playful. We don't care that our feet are dirty and all that stuff, right? You know, everything's a playground, and then we lose that, you know, and that's just growing up, right?
Mm.
You know, when I went into the land, to the sweat lodge and actually started connecting with the land, I felt that my way of looking at the world started going back to the way I looked at it as a child. I started feeling that magic within the land, and that's when I realized the importance of and how magical and how wonderful, you know, our teachings are. And I started gravitating towards, you know, being around our elders again and hearing the language, because my body would dance inside, or would quiver, or would cry, but it moved. It woke up, and it helped me through depression. It helped me through a lot of difficult things in my life, you know. And I never really understood it, but all I knew that it made me feel alive.
Mm.
And so, you know, how could you not? It becomes an addiction, right?
Yeah,
of learning about the drum and learning about your voice, and learning about the breath, and learning about my relationship with the land, and how much it's it's the mother.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's a magical place, and it just stilled me. It gave me purpose and all these things. I think that, you know, we are really yearning for connection, and it makes me feel like I don't ever feel alone, and that's what the land makes me feel, never alone. So yeah.
Mm.
But with Ma, I started becoming, you know, playful again. You know, I started, as I was writing, I started seeing this character being playful and going through all these places of time. And it was entering different bodies, it was shape-shifting, it was, becoming my mother, and it becoming my grandfather, but I was in the body of my grandfather and my grandmother and my uncle and, all these people in my community. And I was walking and trying to understand why it is the way it is, and it was all rooted from the word love. But I don't want to go on and on and on, but I'll tell you the epiphany of why I do what I do came from me writing about love. Because I'm a painter, I'll be a painter forever, but why I do this work is when I was writing Find a Holistic Voice, I really wanted to talk about how I welcome love back into my life. But when I wrote about love, it took me to a very dark place. And I was like, how could a beautiful word take me to a dark place? But it did, So I seen this nun writing the word love, and I'm a young kid. I look like everyone else in this classroom, and I have this nun trying to teach me the word love. And I'm thinking, how can you teach the word love when you've taken everything that love meant to us? Because if I told my mother when I loved her, she would cry, and she'd not cry, but she'd kind of weep, right? She'd be like, oh. And, she would never tell me that she loved me back. And I'd ask my friends, does your parents tell you that they love you? No, but I know they love me. Yeah. And so I wondered, when did we have to create the word love? Because Imelda, who is a language carrier, they still create words. So I remember when I was with my teacher, Imelda, she was like, I got to go to Kingsclear because we got to find a word for laptop.
That's wonderful.
Right?
Yeah.
Because as the world evolves,
Sure.
language evolves, it grows. And so I'm thinking, when did they have to create the word Gizalmo, which means love? When we need to hear it, because, love for us was allowing my mother to braid my hair, allowing me to braid my mother's hair, like teaching me how to pick the berries, teaching me how to hunt, teaching me how to fish, teaching me how to make my regalia, my moccasins, to dance, to go into my sweat lodge. You took everything that love was to us. And, that is, when I look at dance, and I look at singing, and I look at, embracing our stories through our regalias and our ceremonial wear, it's like, it's sad. Because it's like, we're hungry, and there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in our community. But when I think about storytelling, when I think about theater, everyone has a place in theater and storytelling. You have the dancers, you have the speakers, you have the builders, you have the language, you have all this that we're all hungry for. And so I need to do work louder than a painting can speak. And Ma is a character that shapeshifts. Anyone can play Ma. It doesn't matter if you're a woman, or you're a man, if you're young and old. It doesn't matter if you're two-spirited. Because anyone can be Ma. Because Ma is a magical being that shapeshifts and tries to understand this world today for tomorrow. So that's Ma.
An amazing answer. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Because, sorry.
Sorry, I want to
please.
kind of bounce off that. I agree. I think for a lot of queer people, the majority of your life is spent reclaiming. You were not right when you were small. People didn't think you were correct, and you have spent your adult life rebuilding from that. And I'm going to be 55 soonish, and I realized just not that long ago that I spent my 40s and early 50s kind of recuperating from that, from 20 plus years of just actively trying to claw out a space and actively trying to own who I was, and because so much of it had been negated inside me. And I think that's something that a lot of queer people go through in early adulthood, where they rebuild themselves and reclaim their own space that they were told was wrong to even be in. And it's, now I feel like it's kind of, I had this weird thing happen today. It was almost like, it wasn't quite like a stroke, but it was almost like a stroke. And, because, you know, it's always common, right? And so I went in, I have a little office over there for the residency, and I went, I don't know how to do anything, and I went to use the photocopier, and of course it was wrong, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I went into the office where the admin people are, and I was like, made that face, and they're, oh, photocopier, and so I'm waiting for them to do it, because I don't know how to do it, and I saw these two paintings. I thought, I know that artist. Is that? Yeah, and I went and looked, they were labeled. I said, yeah, it's Bill Bissett. Now, Bill Bissett is a queer Canadian poet, sound artist, painter. I first met him in 1984 at the University of New Brunswick in St. John. And he came and did this elaborate spoken word performance, and it was all about meeting guys at a movie theater and blowing them. And it was beautiful. And everyone's sitting there going, what is this? And except, you know, one or two professors who intentionally brought him for that, I think, but just to, you know, stir up some shit. And I realized I had this kind of like echoing feeling. I don't know, like, oh my God, like he was the first queer artist I ever saw in person. I mean, you know, Paul Lynde was on TV when I was a kid, but he was like the first, oh my God. And I realized it kind of all caught up with me, like the endless tunnel. I don't know how to explain it visually. It was kind of like this reverberation. And Bill's still with us, so you know, I'll send him an email tomorrow or something saying I saw those paintings. But like, oh yeah, I'm part of this long chain of things that often I don't acknowledge and I don't respect. And it's only as I've gotten older that I've been able to fully do that, to not brush it off. And I went through a long period where I really resented being called, I remember having an argument with my brother about this, I really resented being called a gay writer. And I remember arguing with him. My brother is a coach, he coaches sports. And what else do people coach? He's a sports coach. And I remember saying, you know, you're never going to read heterosexual coach Paul Vaughan in the newspaper. Never, 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 never. It's never going to happen. So you don't live with a modifier. And when you live with a modifier, there are pros and cons, would be my short answer to it. And the pro is that if you make it past a certain age and you put up with it, you kind of start to own it. And that's only been within the last decade of my life, where I felt like, oh yeah, I can't, and also at a certain point, I kind of have no more choice left. You know, there's certain countries I can't go to, for instance, because if they Google me, I can't go in that country, you know. It's just there.
Can we pick at the earlier part of that?
Okay.
So I guess I'd just like you to talk a little bit about not necessarily your formative years, but what it was like growing up in
my Lord.
70s and 80s in semi-rural New
Hellish.
Brunswick for you. Yeah, in a word.
Hellish. Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to be negative tonight, but it was hellish. I was probably beat up once a week, and certainly picked on every single day of public school. I remember in grade 7, there was this kid who later became a city councilor in St. John, so I can say his name, Peter McGuire, and he walked up to me in grade 7. I'd never laid eyes on this kid because we came from different schools, right? And I'm like, I was in my best because it was the first day of grade 7, so there was like, it was a polyester sort of double outfit from Sears, and I was very proud of it. And he walked right up to me. I'd never seen this kid before. Walked right up to me and went, "Faggot." And he did that every day through the rest of public education. Every day. And that was the bad part of it, was the public part of it. The upside of it was that my father was just not there. My mother was very, very positive about things. She had her own boundaries, but I came out at about 14 to her, and she said, "Oh, that's lovely, dear," and just kind of walked away. And then the next day I came home, and there was this book called Boys and Sex on the bed, and she'd put a bookmark in the micro chapter on homosexuality, which basically said, "It's fine. Don't worry about it. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you."
Wow.
Yeah, so I always had both. I always had incredibly loving, accepting people, and then like the Peter McGuires. You know, there was always these two forces kicking at me, and so it was both. It's really easy to tell sad stories of growing up and as a minority member of any kind in a small rural place, but there are also joys. And you were talking about magic earlier, and I've always been interested in the occult ever since I was a kid. I read cards. I have a kind of Wiccan home practice. And crystals. And weirdly, that became the way I was gay. Richard's just kind of mysterious, you know, and
Mystic gay.
well, like no, they didn't. The G word was never used. It was just because, okay, well, he's weird. You can be weird. They just need a reason why you're weird, and so that became the reason why I was weird. And it's a chicken and egg thing. I don't know which came first. Did I find this so that I could have a way out, or was it in me to begin with? Don't know. But yeah, it was an odd time. It was also, I'm one of those people who grew up before the internet, and suddenly there's the internet, and that I have a trans nephew who's about 25. He has he doesn't have an easy life, but he has no idea what it was like when I was his age. So I would say, instead of sitting around and sort of, you know, crying face down in bed about my shitty childhood, I'd rather make art about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and for me, I just never thought anything was wrong for kissing girls. I just thought it was like, I never like, labeled myself or felt I had to label myself or I had to define what that is, or whatever. I just never thought I was weird or some alien for kissing girls. And I was young when I was kissing girls, and let's go for a bike ride in the woods, but I was, but it's funny because I remember the first person I ever took home was a girl. I never thought anything of it, and she stayed the night, and my mom was like, "Does she want breakfast?" And so, but my mother is very loving. Like, if I wanted to be a ballerina, she's like out there getting me the ballet shoes kind of thing. But we had some really amazing people, artists in our life, and she was a hippie anyways, but people would come up to her, and because I'd also dated men, dated women, I dated men. I never thought it was a problem, I guess must be a very loving person, and for me, like, I just never thought I had to justify it or I had to explain my reasons because that's my personal life. Why do I have to explain that, And I always loved it that, when I heard my mother say this, it's like they'd go up to my mother, like one person actually went up to my mother, "What is up with Natalie? She's dating a woman, she's dating a man, I thought she was a lesbian, and this and that." My My mom's like, she's an artist. You know? But that, you know, when I tell that story to, like, you know, other folks who are lesbian or queer, however they identify themselves, they weren't as welcoming. You know what I mean? And, you know, coming to Fredericton, my relationships were women. So all of a sudden, I became in this circle of, you know, they labeled me. I didn't label myself, but they've seen me as a lesbian, as a queer woman. But when I had a partner who was a man, it was just like, they were mad.
Wow.
They were so mad, you know what I mean? And you know that I talk about that because I'll talk with them about it because I don't think that's cool, you know? And for me, I fall in love with spirit. That's what I fall in love with. And it doesn't matter whether it is a trans, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman. I fall in love with spirit, and I fall in how that spirit makes me feel, you know? And I know that, you know, I remember going back to a lot of my write-ins. One of my write-ins, I said, you know, see me as a salmon, you know? When you see that salmon in the water, I'm like, oh my God, that's a beautiful salmon. Look at that magic skin. Look at the belly. You know, we're gonna feast on it. We're gonna have a ceremony. We're not like, okay, is there a vagina on there?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what is this? You know what I mean? We see the salmon, and it's beautiful. And you honor it, you feast on it. It's ceremonial, it's sacred. And that's how I see everyone, as sacred, you know? See me as a salmon, I see you as salmon, you know? And that's, I know that, so going into my work, I don't, you know, feel like I have to put it on top and just, you know, that's myself though. But I understand ones who do and have to. And I believe that we definitely need to hear those stories, and we need to like create more space to hear those stories, and because those stories have been silenced too long, you know. So, but yeah, I just wanted to share that.
I went through, I think a lot of artists who come from, who are not part of the dominant culture, go through a period where a lot of their work is about who they are, and it's aggressively so. And then it's not that you grow out of it. That's not what I mean. It's just that it becomes increasingly less important, and it becomes important on that level. It becomes less important on the signaling level and more important on the interior level. Like what does this mean to me? What am I making from this? But I had to go through, and a lot of the queer artists I know had to go through this period of signaling out our queerness because we felt unheard.
Yeah.
And I don't feel any more heard. I just feel heard differently now. And that's okay. You know, I see that as a progress. Who knows where that leads eventually. But, I'm aiming for stately old queen is what I'm going for. Okay, so see you in 10 years. Yeah.
Well, this might not be the best follow-up question because I don't know that we've like nailed down this idea of identity.
Okay,
or
let's try.
Yeah, sure. But I was thinking about because sort of the theme of the night is joy and identity and creativity. If we could hear a little bit about your process of finding joy in art making or creation, or finding joy in identity, if there is joy to be found there.
Oh, there's lots.
Yeah.
There's lots. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
It wasn't. It didn't take me long to figure out as a young artist that being queer meant I saw things differently, and I used to interpret that as something of a handicap because I felt like I couldn't connect to larger audiences. I thought, and I can remember that when I was an emerging artist, people telling me, well, you make gay work, which was the weird Canadian polite way of saying nobody else but gays care about your work. And the joy of it, though, is that it's fluid. And it's like having a tool that you can use at times, for me, that sometimes my queerness gives me a kind of laser-like focus on what's going on in the world and what's going on around me, and because I make my small amounts of money from cultural commentary, I have to kind of keep up with stuff, and I see it through a queer lens. And that, I think, is a real benefit. And when we talk about it, identity in art, I think it's more beneficial to talk about it in terms of how it ebbs and flows through your work, as opposed to it's a linear progression, that you are this, therefore you make that. That has never been true, and it never works. But when you realize, okay, people have mixed places they come from, mixed identities, people have their own heritage, that they use that in a kind of slippery way, which sounds negative, but I don't mean it that way. I think being a little slippery is, first off, it's an innately sort of postmodern state that we all live in, and also it's just useful and helpful, and it makes you adapt faster. I don't think it's unusual that here we are, we're both artists talking about identity. We both do lots of different things, and I think that's something that when you come out of being apart from the dominant culture, you don't feel restricted with experimenting because you have nothing to lose.
I'm really thankful that I've created this character, Ma. Ma has brought joy into my life because it brought playfulness in my life. You know, I'm able to go into this character and explore and navigate and go under and over and do all these things. And with and just travel with it. Travel with it in a creative way, whether it's through song, whether through words, whether through, you know what I mean? And so that's been bringing a lot of joy in my life. You know, early on, like my intentions was like, you know, I wasn't gonna go and be an artist and all that stuff. Like, you know, my journey in this work really is rooted from it started healing me, you know what I mean? And when I started learning about the teachings and the stories, I started drawing them and painting them so I would remember them, because you know, and it also with the paintings, I would remember the songs, I would remember the teachings, and so I kept on painting them, and as I was painting them, people responded to it because they were seeing themselves in the work, and there was like, you know, so they needed a reminder of that too. So when it comes to identity, and joy, you know, finding a Wolastoqiyik voice helped me just go, bleh. You know, this is what happened in my life, blah. You know, shake it off, and just like didn't expect for it to be shared. I had no intentions for that work to be shared to anybody, but just it was like a diary of like, blah, you know, let me just really say it, right? But what it did was, you know, I felt reborn, and that I started walking with that, and with that rebirth, I was really hungry of learning more about, you know, what was around me, the people around me. I'm talking about everyone in this community, not just my Indigenous brothers and sisters, but who I share the land with and who I interact with, and you know, so identity for me and joy is it's just being and just like experiencing and creating moments of embracing the time that's shared in that moment right now. That's why a lot of my work is improv. And directors drives them crazy, you know. But it's on the spot, because like, you know, when I do open-ends, I feel an urgency just to just belch in this chant. You know, for me, that's an offering. It's saying thank you for sharing this time with me. Thank you. Not only the ones who are physically here, but the ones who's wrapping us. You know, our ancestors who are wrapping us. I want to just say thank you. And we're in this moment together, and people are like, can we hear that song again? I don't know if it's going to come back again, because it's that moment we shared together. And you know, those are things that I think about. I don't do work to fill stages. I don't do work just to think about when my solo is going to be at the Beaverbrook. You know, what I think about is us, you know, spending more time together, having more conversations together, interacting more, laying away from the cell phones, being able to look at one another as we walk by. My teacher said that, you know, what's going to break, you know, we're always talking about the earth and how it's hurting. What we're losing is our human connection. And that's what I think about, is that human connection, that human spirit, you know, that I feel we need to feed more. So for me, identity, joy is knowing that I'm part of this land, and the land is part of me. And I have my bundle that I walk with, and I share stories. And wherever that goes with me, I'm happy to be in the woods. I live very modest. I'd be happy just to paint and sing. I'm good. I'm really good. And I feel very content, and I feel very happy in my life. And the less that I don't know, this is good for me. I look forward to this, you know, so I'm simple, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think it's a very good way of putting it. So this next question,
I love how you keep prefacing your questions.
Well, it's the trick of like letting things just happen organically, but also trying to look down at my notes at the questions that I'd like to ask. But so this is kind of a foil to what you just said, Natalie. But I think that identity-based art or life-based work can often be interpreted really, really differently from inside and outside of your own community or people that share your identity. And I'm just wondering if either of you factor that idea into your work somehow, if it has ever censored you in some way, either directly or indirectly, or if you've ever considered as what are you saying, Richard? The dominant society,
the dominant culture,
the dominant culture, and how they might interpret your work. I know that both of you seem to be pretty centered on not necessarily doing that.
It's not quite that. It's just I know what you're saying.
Thank you.
I used to have a lot more anxiety about getting it right, because in a couple times in my life I've been like the only gay, and you know I used to write for the National Post, and I was really the only gay at the National Post. And, you know, or like when we had more media, you know, a famous gay person would die, and they'd be like, oh, we need 500 words on that dead gay. And I used to have this anxiety about getting it right until I realized that no, my sense of my queerness is as valid as any external sense of what queerness is, and that no one gets to tell me what my queerness is, which also means I'm allowed to be wrong, and that's okay too. But I think a lot of people who go through their careers, and whether they wish to be or not, they get identified, because the way the arts work is partly marketing. You get something gets attached to you, and how you employ that is the game, not so much do I react against it or with it. It's that's going to be out there anyway, that modifier. So how do I use it is what I constantly ask myself. How do I use this? And use it honestly. But I no longer feel like I'm speaking for every queer person on the planet, and I never wanted to anyway, and I don't feel that anymore.
I'm the same, you know, they see me as, I'm an Indigenous artist. I do Indigenous stories, I do Indigenous work and all this stuff. But, you know, there's not only just one teaching, and I always express that too, and I know that some people may think my stuff is kumbaya. Oh my gosh, this is some hippie girl who's just all about the land and Mother Earth and all that stuff. You know what? And I think I remember for a long time being, you know, kind of weirded out about bringing the drum, right? You know, or bringing out the medicines, or starting my talk with that, you know. But it's what grounds me, and it's what, you know, it is what helps me, you know, find my words, because I do struggle with speaking, right? But, you know, I also really love the arts, and I love seeing, you know, stories in many different ways. Even I love going into galleries, I love seeing stories on stage. So just because that is not, you know, my drive to be on stages and stuff doesn't mean I don't support, you know, the way that others want to share their story and their goals. You know, I'm really enjoying being more on the sidelines as a helper, you know what I mean? Into helping them tell their story the way they want and need to tell their story. And I sit and I listen, I witness, and I respond if they, you know, welcome me in that space. I love that, you know, so but, you know, I definitely became more learning to protect myself, you know, with thinking, you know, am I supposed to be the one sitting here doing a talk? You know, like when I get approached to do talks or presentations or being part of things, like I have to, you know, am I the one to do this? Should I do this? Why am I doing this? I ask myself all these questions because, you know, I've been in some really, you know, icky situations I put myself in, and I had to heal through that, you know. So yeah, like, so I've learned a bit to ask the questions, to know about this space before going into it, digging to know the people, and what's really important to me is that, you know, it's not a one-trick pony kind of thing, you know. A one-trick pony? What's the word in? Anyways, come on, I want to be friends, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want to come in and just be like, do us a song, all right, thank you, all right. So, you know, so I'm not about that. I love the community. I love building relationships and continuing to collaborate and share the space and work together. So that's what I'm all about. So I became a bit more choosy and really trying to stay within the like-minded circles in what I do. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And thanks for being here.
But I asked her when you messaged me, like, why?
I was
hi. Like, I don't know, but you have to ask the questions.
You have to ask, yeah.
And I'm so happy we met up before coming here, had coffee and stuff, and I'm so happy we did that. I think that should happen, especially we never met each other before,
till
right?
now, till last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I very rarely now will take the token gay gigs. Well, there's fewer and fewer of them because there's no gigs left. But also, it's just I don't. I feel like that's for younger people now, because my idea of queerness is probably very different than a 25-year-old, and that's not a negative thing either. It's just I want to hear. I'm at the point where I want to hear how does it work for you now. I want to hear that, and I don't. I've found doing. This is the longest residency I've ever had. I've never had like this many months before. I've had 2 weeks here and 2 weeks over there, whatever, and those are great too. But I have because of it. It happened again today, where young writers are coming in and talking to me, and they find really elaborate ways to ask me what's the right way to write this, and I have to keep saying, because I do truly believe this, there is no right way. There's no wrong way either. There's your way, and we can share that, but right and wrong aren't in this equation at this point. They might be later, but they're not here now.
I think we have time for one more question from me, and then hopefully we can get one or two people from our audience to ask a question.
No, we'll just pick on them if they
yeah. Single them out. So I just wanted to touch on the role of mentorship in both of your practices. If there's any particular person that influenced the medium that you work on, or the sort of the direction that your output is taken.
Yeah.
I've been really lucky that way, and I intentionally use the word lucky because that's all it is. Because there's lots of emerging artists out there who don't have anyone to talk to. I was really lucky when I was living here in my 20s. I had him as a professor more than once, and then we became friends. A man named William Prouty, who was an out gay professor at University of Brunswick, St. John, and ran like a chapbook series and a magazine, and he just did so much stuff. And he was kind of the first person to say to me, adult person to say to me, yeah, you can make gay work. Go ahead. And so I did. And back when we still called it gay work, you know what I mean? And then later, after I finished university, Sky Gilbert, a Canadian queer playwright who ran up until about 20 years ago, he ran a queer theater in Toronto. And he said, oh, you seem to be interesting, come along. Come live here for a while, see what happens. I got really lucky twice. And I think without them, I would not have done a tenth of what I've done, honestly, because you do need at certain points in your life, it's not about permission, it's about someone saying, I believe in you, and I'm like you too. And I used to have the same questions you had, and here I am now. And you need to see that at a certain point in your life. You need to see successful people who look like you and do the same things you do.
Yeah, my first mentor, was Gwen Bear-Sagate, who was the Native Studies teacher at the craft school, and she was the elder residence here. She's passed on, and she continues to be my mentor, and very powerful woman in many different ways. When it came to the teachings and directed me to the people I needed in my life. With painting, it's a bit of self-taught, I went to the craft school and I dabbled a bit. I took surface design, which is now fiber arts, which is kind of learning more about working with different techniques, but it was really quick. It's like, this is how oils are done. This is how acrylics are done. It was not, the craft school is not a fine arts school, So it's pretty much self-taught, and I found this way that a technique that I've developed, you know. But my mother hung around with artists, and one I always reached out to was Duze Christmas, who was probably my first painting mentor to actually look at my work and get that critiqued, you know, from someone who paints also from like, you know, stories of the Wabanaki, of the Wolastoqiyik people. You know, I started doing the same in my own way, and you know, so she's passed before the holidays. So that was been really tough. Shirley Bear is another painter back home, and writer, and you know, so she doesn't do that anymore. So spending time with her is very, very valuable. And you know, right now I'd say Melda Pearly is, and so some of them are artists, but a lot of the people that I hang out with are storytellers, are language carriers, the ones who know the stories before the band, you know. So, but I think that mentors are super important in many different areas in life.
No matter what you're doing.
Yeah,
I agree.
you know. So yeah, I have people that I reach out to with skills that I want to learn more of and develop, or I don't know nothing about, right? And but yeah, mentors are super important, and it's because of those mentors that, you know, it's that encouragement that no, don't stop, you know, do this, do that, you know, kind of thing. But yeah,
I think there's something unique about Canada in that we have a long pre-colonial and post-colonial artistic heritage, and yet we're really reluctant to embrace our artists. And one of the ways we do that in Canada is we like to kind of go, okay, well, you're a woman painter, you know, you can still, I'm sure if I went through, I used to be an art critic, and I still get email lists about upcoming art shows that I'm not covering. And anyway, I got one the other day. It was like, it's the blah blah blah's first all-female artist show. I'm like, what? What? We still do this? And it struck me that there's something about, and I mean, it's too big a topic to unpack in a way in an evening, but there's something about the post-colonial reality of Canada that makes us distrust creativity. And because of that, the people who tend to thrive in that distrustful environment are people who have a level of urgency to what they need to communicate. And I think that's why most of our prominent artists are, the ones that I really respect, come from non-mainstream backgrounds.
Can we actually unpack that a little bit more?
Okay, I can do it. No, I can do it really quickly. And it's still true, unfortunately. When I was growing up here, everything good was not here. We were told in school, the minute you graduate, get out. And the center is always elsewhere. This is a perennial post-colonial problem. And I was raised to believe the center was Britain when I was a kid. And then when I moved to Toronto as a young adult, Torontonians believed the center is New York City. And I was the only media person, you know, I would meet other journalists and cultural commentators, and they would say, oh, did you read that thing in the New Yorker? And I'm like, I don't read the New Yorker. And they'd go, what? I said, well, I don't fucking live in New York. Why would I read? I don't care about what's on at the Gagosian or whatever. Like, I don't live there. I'm not going to see it. You know, but it perpetuates. Now I live in Montreal. It's all about France. Everything is still about France. And so who sticks out in this? It's not the copycats. It's not the people trying to attach themselves in some indirect way to these fantasy centers. It's people who operate on a whole other level or a whole other planet of like, no, I'm here and I'm making this. That is what I'm drawn to. I'm not drawn to work that attempts to mimic influences from our former masters.
That's very cool. I don't, maybe other people are familiar with that idea, but it's news to me, and it's fascinating.
It happens here too. I mean, I think people default to, it's interesting to me that when you watch the evening news, it's all out of Halifax. And that's a microcosm of the same pattern. You know, wherever you are is never the center. That's how it works.
And New Brunswick is sort of a strange province too, because I think to the rest of Canada we're seen as very rural, and we probably are. But then you have small epicenters like maybe Moncton or Fredericton that are urban in a provincial understanding of it, but still very rural and periphery.
And I agree with you, and I used to really resent that. I used to really think that that was a problem here. And now, having watched hyperdevelopment ruin every single city I've ever lived in, I say, okay, if we're the North Korea of Canada, let's just stay that way. Because I've seen what happens. It's ugly.
I think we've got a new motto for our license.
North Korea of Canada, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we need to be proud of. I really think we need to, like, I remember going into, like, you know, with Fine and Wolastoqiyik Voice too, I knew she was a dancer. And I wanted her to be a Wabanaki dancer. And I know some powwow dancers, but there's really no Indigenous dancers that are living in here in the Atlantic that are doing stage work that will tour.
Yeah.
So I had to reach out, and I found Ariel Evans, who has Mi'kmaq roots. I thought, that's great. You know, I reached out to her. She came here, and now she does Fine and Wolastoqiyik Voice, right? But moving into this next work, it was actually, Ma was like a beast of a thing I was working on. And but my goal was to build capacity, and it still is a goal for me to build capacity here. But I need to go to Toronto to find those Indigenous performers, those actors, those dancers and stuff. So I got so excited. I was like, I went to Toronto, going to this festival, gonna find, you know, meet all these cool Indigenous folks. And, you know, at the time, Native Earth took on Fine and Wolastoqiyik Voice, you know, this new playwright came out with their first play, first thing she wrote, blah, 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 blah. I walked in, and they're like, oh, so you just write a play, and you're just like, in Toronto. And this is my peers, you know? Where did you study? You know, who did you work with? And I'm like, I thought it was so funny because they were writing work on that was focused on decolonization, reconciliation, and I called them right out on it. I was just like, I learned from my community, my teachers in my community, the languages in my community, the land in my community. I was like, my stories are from my community, and you're saying that I'm not skilled enough to be in the circle with you because I never studied in Stratford or something.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
You better check yourself before you wreck yourself because you're forgetting who you are as an Indigenous person. If you think that you need, you know, a non-Indigenous person to say you're good enough to be on the stage. You know, so that was my fight, you know what I mean? And I called them all out on it. You know, I came out here reaching out for some help for my Indigenous people because I need some movers and shakers, you know. But
do you think those folks are kind of trapped in this hierarchy that is inherited, not from their own culture?
Well, yeah, because we're just, you know, just like you talked about your journey. We were trying to find a place where silence for so long. So then what? Like I wrote a piece like, yeah, I could dress like you, can talk like you, I can do all the things you could do. I could go to university like you, I could be a lawyer like you, I could be a hockey player like you, but I'm not you. We did it to survive.
Yeah.
We survived, we're here. Now all of a sudden we have this permission to be who we are. So let us be who we are. And that's what it is. It's like, you know, and that's kind of been the core of my work. I know that, you know, I hope our relationships get better. I hope we collaborate more. I hope that there's less friction and less, awkwardness in circles. And I think that what's going to help us get through that discomfort is for us to talk in a safe place, to not feel judged, and to ask those difficult questions. And why is it this way? You know what I mean? And understand our differences, and I'll be okay with those differences too, right? We as Indigenous people need to decolonize ourselves, and when people talk about truth reconciliation, we need to reconcile with ourselves. That's the first step. And I believe that stories and conversations and sharing space within, in our circles is gonna still help that, because a lot of us are angry, and a lot of us are sad, and a lot of us have a bunch of feelings we don't know what to do with. And so I hope that, with this work that I'm doing, helps us unravel all those emotions that are, within us. My mom says, Natalie, why you, because a lot of the topics I talked about was day schools. We don't talk about day schools too much. We always talk about residential schools, but my mother was in day schools. Many people were in day schools. And I asked her questions, and, Natalie, why are you always writing stuff that is so heavy? And I said, until our young ones don't have to carry it anymore.
Right.
And I'll do it until then. So, yeah, I don't want, a young one to feel and not wondering what their place is here, as person who is a settler. Well, this has been home for me. It's been home to my mother and my grandmothers and all this stuff. So what is my place here? And I want young ones of many of us to know our place here and feel home here. So, and not look at stuff and be like, oh my God, all this crap happened. Fuck.
Yeah, if we're not learning from it, then yeah, I agree. Yeah,
so I
we're
mean,
burdened by it. If we're
it
not
sucks.
learning from
It makes us feel weird and whatever, but know what? Shit, we gotta talk about it.
Yeah.
We have to. So that's kind of been a lot of, with Ma, is talking about those really difficult things that has happened here on these lands, but also, still carry that joy, still carry that happiness. Because I said, in the line where I was talking to my mother, I was just like, I need to hear your stories, and I'll carry them in a bundle. I'll carry them and remember, because your stories are important, but I can't carry them in my blood because it's too painful. So I think that's a reminder. We're carrying a lot of trauma that does not belong to us, and it's in our bloods, and it's about, letting it go. So that's what I'm hoping that, with my work, it helps me, but also inspires others to tell their stories and let that go. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I'm going to take over and now I'm going to talk. But I used to make art quite a bit in university, and then I stopped. And I haven't made art in quite a while, but I used it, I think, for the singular purpose of purging all the negative thoughts that I had about my own identity, and sort of the intergenerational trauma that I internalized from growing up in rural New Brunswick without any queer mentors or elders, because oh my God. So many people in the generation before me died as a result of the AIDS crisis, and I used art to process that pain of not having someone to look up to. But I really admire the way that both of you use art in a way that is not so focused on negativity and not so focused on trauma. And your message of healing starting at home and then spreading that outwards, I think is so important right now. So thank you both for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to say that was really revelatory and inspirational from both of you.
Thank you.
I have a question, I guess it's for both of you guys. You both kind of touched on this topic. The idea of being, on one hand, the gaze writer, I make, or like the writer, the artist for Indigenous people, kind of cater the idea that you would have to cater to a community, or that you would have like a limited reach. And on the other hand, the idea of being the token gay, you know what I mean? The idea that you would conform or present to the dominant culture's idea of what people of your identity would create as art. How do you reach that greater audience while still having integrity to your own identity?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you. It's hard. It's easier than it used to be, but it's hard. There is a kind of, I don't know how to put it exactly yet. Sometimes it can be very distracting. And we do live in a capitalist society, and when you are an artist, you have to also kind of accept, if you wish, I feel like I had to accept it, that you're also making product that is for sale. And my family owned a business. I come from a retail background. I have a very retail mind. I won't sell my soul, but I have a retail mind. And I kind of know now, but I didn't when I was starting out, when to kind of add a gay flavor to something and when not, where it could sell, where it couldn't, where it would reach people, where it couldn't. There was an awful lot of policing when I was a younger artist around that. They were always worried that I would go too far. And when you're queer, you hear that word a lot too, T-O-O. And I used to hear it a lot as a young queer artist. Oh, you're too this, you're too that. It's dissipated a lot, and I think that with the limitless platforms available now to every artist, it's less and less important to try to figure out, okay, who is this for? How do I sell it to them? Because it's for everybody now. It's 7 billion of us or whatever. I'm not really answering your question. I recognize that.
Tough question.
It's a tough question. I'm not entirely certain. There is a burden of honesty to some extent, and I don't read reviews of my own work. I stopped. I stopped years ago reading, but the ones that have, when I used to read them, the ones that have always hurt the most were the ones that came from within the community. Because I felt like I owed them something. I don't feel that anymore. I only owe myself things. I owe myself that burden of honesty. That's it. But that's not something I had when I was a young artist. I didn't have that confidence.
I don't know how to answer. How do I engage in a wider audience? Like, how do
while still having integrity to your own identity. Like, how do you avoid compromising, if that makes sense? Or is that even something you worry about? Maybe you don't.
Oh, I get so tired of compromising. I think I cut it off a couple years ago. I really did, because I was compromising too much. And do you know what it was? And I keep on talking about this stuff, but this is a really big thing as being like, as an Indigenous person. Canada 150 just broke me.
Mm.
It broke me, and it just was like, you know what I mean? And that was really tough. It's just for a lot of reasons and stuff. And you have to understand too, a lot of this stuff that came out, I did not know. So I felt very naive. I felt like I had to go through a lot of healing and stuff. So that really shifted a lot of my path and why I do, and in this journey, like once that happened, because I felt like all of a sudden this hope was like weighted on me of being a spokesperson for our people and representing our people and knowing all those answers. You know, and people coming up to me and saying, you know, asking me a question, and I'm like, I don't know the answer. What do you mean you don't know the answer? You're Indigenous, right? Like, you should know the answer, right? You know, I'm just like, but I don't, you know?
Yeah.
So I learned to, I just had to reevaluate myself big time around that time, and going into sharing my work and integrity is, you know, for one thing, I don't do it for the price. I don't like, and I think too, it's my lifestyle that I choose to live, and my mentors I go to, that their input is important. Like, for instance, I just got asked, it's right on, it's recording, I just got asked to do our nation flag. We don't have one. The Mi'kmaq have their flag, the Passamaquoddy have their flag. Now you see the Wolastoqiyik Grand Council has a flag, but the Wolastoqiyik people of this province, we do not have a flag. Well, it was just not part of our culture, right? But, you know, so I got asked to do our flag, and I'm thinking, oh, wow. And so our community got together and said, we want her to do our flag, you know? And so, but my first thing was like consultation instantly, you know? So I go to my elders. I really am old school like that. I go to my elders, I go to my community, I talk to them, and it's like, and it's, those teachings are so embedded in me, so strong, that I don't, as much as sometimes I just want to go, yes, I step back and be like, okay, what does this look like? And I also discovered that, you know, I do my work, it does not just benefit me, it benefits my community at whole. And that's kind of a foundation of how I work. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Okay.
Anything you do with good intentions, as flawed as it might be, and you know, I've plenty of flops in my career. It's I don't mind that, because I feel like I thought I knew what I was doing at the time, and I wasn't trying to con anybody, and those are the only two questions I can ask myself.
No, it's so true, and that came from Gwen Bear's teachings. You know, I've been in different lodges with different lodge keepers. This is for example, and everyone has their own teachings on how to do things. There's not one way to do things. But what was great about Gwen Bear's teaching is that if you're going, like, because we're so timid, so this is so new to us, like, you know, learning our teachings and learning how to place, you know, around the sacred fire and going into these ceremonies, I felt like there's like all these like guidelines, right? So you get anxiety of going in, but we shouldn't feel anxiety going into something really beautiful. And what was taught to me is if you're going in with intentions of love and kindness and respect, there's no wrong way of doing things, you know. And that's kind of how I go into, like, even before I came here, I smudged before I started talking, because I shake sometimes when I speak, and I just wanted to speak from my heart and from my spirit, right? So, yeah, so that's kind of I can't apologize if I'm speaking from that place.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good answer. We maybe have time for one more if people want to do that, or we can all just stand up and eat fruit and chit chat. That also sounds nice, unless anyone has a burning.
I was clapping because it was so good. I really enjoyed it. You all speak and what you had to say.
Cool. Well, I think with that,
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you for talking to us and opening up about yourself and your art and how that relates to your identity. I think that I don't know. I feel better.
That's good.
Yeah, I feel more inclined to make art that will do good things. So I think our I think our mission statement's been accomplished.
Blue Monday was this week, so it's kind of nice to have, it's good to, I feel like, I've got two new mentors in a way.
I really, I think it's really important. You can't think of audience, and you can't think of when we're, you gotta,
Yeah.
that's the last thing I think about.
Yeah.
Should be the last thing to think about. We just gotta do the work that we feel we need to do, that we are, this feeling, this urgency of saying something. You just gotta ride with that and think about where it goes afterwards.
And as much as I dislike these things, I mean, I don't even have one. That's how much I hate them. I have like a beat up old BlackBerry knockoff. But with these, it doesn't matter anymore if you're immediate, you make something, you present it to whoever the immediate community is in front of you, the whole world is on that phone. And it's out there for everybody now. I might as well plug it. I'm co-curating an exhibition. It opens in mid-February, and it's all submission-driven. And again, I've been consistently kind of happily surprised by, I got submissions from India, Iran, and Malaysia today.
Wow.
This could not have happened 20 years ago.
Right.
And these are
letters.
Yeah, like
Postcards.
these are. In a way, it doesn't matter whether I haven't opened them yet, but it won't matter whether I like them or not. It's a fact that these people we found each other, and that is a kind of, for me, a revolutionary way of thinking about art production. Like, who am I finding? Not who's finding me anymore, but who am I finding?
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now I want to do a little shameless plug very briefly. But we're teaming up, we're collaborating with King's Lobster Film Festival on February 11th. So if you're free and you want to come back here to the archives, there's going to be films, and actually all the filmmakers will be here who made the short films, and they're all queer films. So Glendon McKinney will be here, Aaron Vaughan, Kelly Hill, and Cassie Burkholder with the Cell Films NP, I think it's called. So it's kids in the GSAs that have actually made like cell films of their what their GSA does, or what it's like to be a queer kid in school. So
Marvelous.
thanks for attending.
Thank you. That was great. Good job.
Hey, good job to you too.